Welcome, travelers, to episode 8 of the Time Travel Trio podcast. I'm Jen. I'm going to be your discussion leader for this episode.
And I'm Hyde.
And I'm Matt.
Today, we're going to be talking about The Time Machine, the 2002 version, starring Guy Pearce, of course, and I guess Samantha Mumba.
Jeremy Irons.
Jeremy Irons, yeah, kind of. It's like way down at the bottom of the credits.
That's unfair.
This movie, yeah, it's kind of one of the best actors in this movie of everyone who's in it. But anyway, this movie is directed by Simon Wells, who is in fact the great-grandson of H.G. Wells, who of course wrote the novel.
Yes, you called it.
Yeah, I did call
You called it
that.
last week.
One of our listeners commented to us, and I was looking up some of the trivia facts, and it is in there as well. So it seems that is actually true. So that's pretty cool. And kind of also then a bummer because of how the movie turned out.
Yeah,
Right, he lit his grandfather. You lit him down!
Yeah, way to go,
Yeah.
Simon. Thanks. So, let's start with the trailer
Yes.
then and go from there.
2002 trailer, so it should be interesting.
2002 theatrical trailer. Here we go.
Our next stop is Antiquities. Make sure that your micro scans are charged for download. Let's go. And Tommy, if you do that again, I will resequence your DNA, so help me. Now march.
Welcome. How may I help you? Over here, area of inquiry.
Tell me about the time machine.
Time Machine was written by H.G. Wells in 1894. It was later adapted to a motion picture by George Pal and a stage musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber, which ran on
that's
Broadway
not what
for
I
23
mean.
years. Would you like to hear selections from the score?
No.
There's a place called Tomorrow.
Thank you. That's quite enough.
Will there be anything else?
No. I think I'll have better luck in a few hundred years.
Time travel,
It's possible, sir.
not in this world.
Where do you come from?
I'm from the past.
I wonder if we'll ever go too far.
With what?
With all of this.
No such thing.
Why have you traveled through time?
To have a question answered. Why can't one change the past?
Why would you want to? You lost someone you loved very much. You should go back to your own time.
Why?
There are things better left not said.
Tell me what's happening here.
What if the truth will haunt your dreams for all time?
Well, I think I'm used to that. This was not supposed to happen. They're human beings.
I can look inside your memories, your dreams, your nightmares.
You have to fight. You have to resist.
Nothing will change the future.
You're wrong. I will change it.
So,
That looked fan-made.
It did.
biggest thing, yeah, it did. It might have been. I don't know. But
Who knows?
yeah, I don't know. But the biggest thing I just noticed was that the score in that trailer was such a ripoff of the Back to the Future score.
Did
you notice that?
I actually know that song. It's by E.S. Posthumous. It's like a band that does
Right, they
like
do trailer music and promotional music.
Yeah, but they also have their own albums that just do like kind of like that kind of music, just nonstop, no lyrics.
But like, if you're making a time travel movie, you don't want to do a score that sounds very similar
What do you
to
do?
a famous. If it were me, I would want to, I don't know.
My friend Robbie, our friend Robbie, has a theory that when a movie is not that good, the louder the trailer music is, and the more familiar the trailer music is, the worse the movie is. Like if you look at something like, we use the example, The Secret Life of Pets coming out from Universal. It's its own original music. It's very light. It's not a lot of dialogue. It's just like really fun and colorful.
Mm-hmm.
You look at something like the Angry Birds music, and the whole trailer is Michael Jackson's Bad song. Because it's like, I like Michael Jackson, and I like Bad.
Yeah.
I will like this movie.
That's funny. My mom actually has a similar thing that she used to say when we would watch trailers, that if they're really, really long, that means that there's nothing good in the movie. They have to show
convince you to see
so
it.
much of the trailer to try and get you to see it. But
That's a good point.
yeah. Anyway, so that trailer, it might have been fan-made, I don't know.
Who knows? It felt fan-made.
It felt a little bit fan-made. But either way, what is your relationship to the movie? Hyde, we'll start with you.
I saw the movie. My dad rented for us, I think, on VHS back in the day, or DVD. Probably VHS. I think we saw the VHS player back then. And we watched the movie one Friday night after school. I don't have really much thought about it. We knew the story. We had read not the full issue version, the abridged version.
Okay.
Of the Time Machine, and so I knew the story, and of course there was Wishbone episode, but I didn't have any majorly negative or positive thoughts about the movie from my at least thinking back on it.
Okay, Matt, what about you?
I saw it in theaters when it came out. I read the novel when I was younger, so I liked the book a lot, and the movie kind of disappointed me. I knew enough about movies to know, what was this? I was about 15 or 16. So I knew enough to know, all right, this is not really true to the source material. This is before I was like, oh, the book was better. That whole age happened. But, I like Samantha Mumba, so I, saw it because I was like, oh, she's in it. And she's not wearing many clothes for most of her scenes. But, I didn't hate it, but I was a little bit disappointed because I knew what the book was. And they changed some things for the better, more or less, but it was mostly for the worse.
Mm-hmm. I have definitely seen this movie before. I don't remember when, but I definitely have vivid memories of Orlando Jones as the hologram. So I know I've seen this movie before. I don't know when, but if I can't even remember, then I have a feeling I didn't really like it very much. So this was my, at least, I would say second or third probably time seeing it. Overall, seeing it this time, did you like it? Did you dislike it?
I appreciated certain things, particularly Jeremy Irons' character and the Orlando Jones character. I thought they were very interesting, but the movie just feels... The movie feels like a very long episode, or a TV movie. It doesn't quite have there's something grand. There's some grandness lacking with it, or something. of that nature.
It looked good. I like the time lapses they had in there. I really dislike the telekinetic Morlock that Jeremy Irons plays. Mm-hmm. It's just not in the novel at all, and it's just really, I don't know, out of place, I think. But I think overall it's all right. I didn't hate it, but yeah.
I started out watching this movie the first probably 20 minutes or so, and was like, oh, this movie's not that bad. What was I thinking? Okay, this could be, not too bad. I'm excited to watch the rest of this. And then it turned into an entirely different movie when he went into 800,000 years in the future. Mm-hmm. And it was terrible. So by the end of the movie, I did not like it in general. So let's talk about the plot. It's not a complicated plot, so it definitely won't take us too long to...
Yeah, we'll get through this one pretty quick.
It's not even a long movie.
It's a pretty short movie, too. But obviously, spoilers ahead. So it's about Alexander, and he is I would call him a bookish school teacher who is always kind of lost in his head and his work and late for stuff and kind of caught up in what he's doing.
Kind
of
awkward and romantic.
Yeah, he doesn't really I would call him a romantic, but he doesn't really pay attention to things that are happening around him. So but for some reason, he's dating this beautiful blonde woman who, on God knows why.
He's got a stable job.
Yeah, he has a stable job, but she's got to be the most patient woman in the world. But even, she's like, where are my flowers? You promised me flowers. Bro, if you promised a girl flowers, you got to bring her some flowers. But anyway, he forgets the flowers. He meets up with her at an ice skating rink, and he shows up late. And he takes her for a walk, and he's really awkward. And then he proposes, and it's this cute romantic scene. And then some super creep comes out of the bushes and he's like, oh, that was he's like the weirdest criminal that I've seen in a really long time. And mind you, this is set in 1899 in the movie. But this guy, he comes out, and he's like, wow, that was such a touching moment. And they're kind of like, what are you doing?
Right.
step off, and then he brings out his
Give me your
gun,
money.
give me your money, and very, very cliche.
And then in the rain.
And then, yeah, in the end, it's like this, he's like, here, take everything, and he's like, give me the ring, too, and all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, you don't even really need the ring. You're just kind of
Yeah.
being a douchebag.
They
at
just
this
got
point. Like,
engaged.
just take his money and leave. You got his watch, you got his wallet, whatever.
He's a crazed criminal. He doesn't care.
Yeah. And so Alexander obviously doesn't want him to take the ring, and Emma, his fiance, tries to resist. And so Alexander charges the robber, I guess, for lack of a better word, is a
Yeah.
robber. And he's trying to pull the gun away, and in doing so, they both kind of struggle, and it fires, hits Emma, obviously, because what else would happen? And she falls and dies. And so then the movie cuts to 4 years later, and Alexander has been even more involved in his work now. And
He's scruffy.
he's very sure.
Has
He's
like
very
6 boards of math equations.
he's scruffy. He's like, he has just walls, like wall to wall, covered in blackboards, and he's just drawing equations. And we learn his friend Philby, who I recognized, who basically kind of played the same character. He was in Down to Earth. Did you ever see that
Oh,
movie?
yeah.
He played the butler.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, Chris
He was in
Rock,
that movie.
right?
Chris Rock.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, which is a much better movie than this. Sorry, but
No time.
so his friend, yeah, no time travel. Well, people travel.
People travel. Yeah.
People travel. His friend Philby, who I guess had set him up with Emma and has been trying to, talk to him and see if Alexander's okay, and they have an interesting conversation. Philby very much, I felt like, was the voice of reason in Alexander's head. He's kind of like, are we going too far? What are you doing? Get back to your job, whatever he says. It was very much, everything he said was very much like a subconscious talking to a person. Which, okay, that's fine. But, either do that and, put him in the rest of the movie, or, I don't know, it felt kind of like he was there and then, forget about him.
He was in the end. He had a little moment in the
He
end.
had a little
But,
moment in the end. He's there to be like, didn't anyone ask him, tell him hey, you probably shouldn't do this? And he's that guy who's like, hey, I said it. I told him not to go and do time travel, and he wouldn't listen.
He didn't listen to me. And so Alexander is building a time machine so that he can change the past and save Emma. So at the end of his conversation with Philby, he's like, he kind of says under his breath, you won't even remember we just had this conversation, a week from now. He says, yeah, come back in a week. That's why he comes back at the end of the movie, because it's been a week. I just made that connection. Okay, anyway. So I don't know what equations he was still doing on his blackboard. It was kind of equations for equation's sake.
It was just differential equations, but he had the machine already.
Yeah, the machine was already done.
That's just his
Yeah.
runtime test. I don't know.
Yeah, right? I don't know.
Just making sure.
He's making sure. Got to double check.
Yeah.
Before I leave forever.
I may have forgotten to carry a 2 somewhere.
Yeah. So then he walks back to his greenhouse, and he pulls back the curtain in this beautiful machine, which I actually think is the best looking machine that we've seen so far.
It looks
I
really
agree.
cool.
It's very
Yeah.
intricate. It's very chrome
It
and
has these-
gold and shiny and
It has
knobs.
these spinny
and,
things on both ends that makes the force shield or whatever around it.
Yeah,
It's
there's
like
like
two
a
spinning
force
orbs or two
bubble
spinning
around
circular
him.
things.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was like a spear from Event Horizon or something. It's just very, not as horrifying, obviously, but just...
Yeah. But it is reassuring that a movie called The Time Machine did a good job with the time machine.
That's true. They
So-
were like, hey, this is what everyone came, this is what people paid money to see this movie. So
Yeah.
the time machine better look good.
I think I did read that was the most expensive thing that they spent money on was,
Money well spent, I
Yeah.
will say.
It looked great. I'm very impressed. Definitely of the 8 episodes that we've done so far, it's my favorite looking machine way of travel. So, he travels back 4 years to the night that Emma was killed, and he shows up early this time to meet her, and he's like, no, let's not go for a walk in the park, and he, hurries and drags her along, and they go in a buggy and carriage and go to some street, and they're walking in a totally different place, and you feel like, okay, they're really far from this robber. There's no way that he could be on this street and going to attack them again. But you still kind of feel like, I don't know about you guys, but I still kind of felt like there's no way this could work. I didn't feel like, even though I had already seen the movie, but it kind of was like, you feel like something bad's going to happen a little bit.
I think even the first time, it's too early in the movie to this is it.
Like he said, stay here on the street. I'll be right back.
Yeah,
That's
and you're
when
like,
you know she's dead.
Right.
Yeah.
You're like,
don't leave her on the street. Come on. Haven't you ever watched anything or read anything? So
too busy working on a time machine.
because she calls him out. Yeah, she calls him out for not bringing flowers again. And he sees that they're across the street from a flower mart. And so he says, hey, stay here. I'll be right back. Don't move. And he runs down and gets flowers, and you can see he's up close to the camera, and then he's standing in front of a window, and at the back is her standing there, and then you can kind of see, not in great detail, but you kind of see this electric car, not electric, but it's
it's a horse and buggy.
Yeah.
Or isn't it not the fancy car thing?
No, I thought it was a horse and buggy that killed her.
Oh.
That was horse. Yeah, that
Okay.
was too.
So the horse and buggy, I guess, is out of control or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it goes forward and it tramples her. I guess I don't know, but somehow
They don't show you.
I think that the cart toppled onto her or something like that. I think they moved something and she was they picked her up and she was
underneath.
Yeah.
Well, either way, she's dead again, and now Alexander's big question for the rest of the movie is, why can't I change the past?
After one try.
You only no, doesn't he?
He only tries once, and then he just says, I'll go to the future to see the answer.
Yeah, he's
That's
I'm going
right.
to travel to the future to see what the answer is. Why can't I change the past? So he goes to 2030, I think,
Yes.
and that's where he meets Orlando Jones, and I'm going to play that clip.
What are you?
I'm the Fifth Avenue Public Library Information Unit. Box registration NY-114. How may I help you?
Oh, a stereopticon of some sort.
Stereopticon? Oh, no, sir. I am a third-generation fusion-powered photonic with verbal and visual link capabilities connected to every database on the planet.
Photonic.
A compendium of all human knowledge. Area of inquiry?
Do you know anything about physics?
Accessing physics.
Mechanical engineering. Dimensional optics. Phonography. Temporal causality. Temporal paradox.
Time travel?
Yes.
Accessing science fiction?
No. Practical application. My question is, why can't one change the past?
Because one cannot travel into the past.
What if one could?
One cannot.
Excuse me, this is something you should trust me on.
Accessing the writings of Isaac Asimov, H.G. Wells, Harlan Ellison, Alexander Hardigan.
Oh, tell me about him.
Alexander Hardigan, 1869 to 1903. American scientist given to eccentric postulation. Found writings include treatise on the creation of a time machine.
Tell me about the time machine.
Time Machine was written by H.G. Wells in 1894. It was later adapted to a motion picture by George Powell and a stage musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber, which ran on
that's
Broadway
not
for
what I
23
mean.
years. Would you like to hear selections from the score?
No.
There's a place called tomorrow, a place of joy, not of sorrow.
Okay.
Orlando Jones is great, by the way. I love
He-
Orlando Jones.
The best part is that clip is on YouTube, so definitely search for it. It's the Time Machine, Time Travel Practical Application movie clip. And it's really funny because you can see Orlando Jones, as a hologram, rolling his eyes at practical application of time travel. It's really funny. So there's a few things I definitely wanted to talk about in that clip. First of all was that he talks about Alexander, the person he's talking to, Alexander, and it says 60 whatever, to 1903. That definitely caught my attention because, he built a time machine, and now we know he's obviously not going to come back to his own time.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think about
It
that.
tells you that at the beginning of the movie. This is pretty early on in the movie. And so I'm like, either he dies traveling somewhere, and the last thing we see of him is last time he travels from 1903, or, he just decides to live somewhere else, which essentially is what happened. But
Right. I didn't catch that. That's a good catch.
so it's pretty quick. Even in that clip, it's pretty quick, and I think it's probably supposed to be pretty quick. You're not really supposed to listen, but it caught my attention. I was like, oh, that's the date of his death. That's interesting. And the other thing I wanted to note was how meta that was.
Yes, extremely meta. It's almost uncomfortably meta.
So
Yeah.
the novel came out in 1894, so Alexander could have read the novel and have been warned about traveling to the future. And also, especially when he goes there, they're called the Morlocks and Eloi, which is what they are in the book. So he should have known well in advance what to expect.
Which means is H.G. Wells a time traveler?
Well, he clearly wasn't really paying attention, though, when he was talking about, tell me about the time machine,
Right.
and then he's like, oh, written by H.G., so it's pretty funny, but...
Can I also say, I think it's impressive that this movie, even though it's 2002 was not that long ago, they pretty much predicted how internet searches would work and that it would never quite get exactly what you wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They only
yeah,
did,
that's
like,
so true.
a little bit.
Close, but not
Close,
exactly
but not
what you were
exactly.
searching for.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And I was like,
that's
oh.
true. That's a good point. So after that, Alexander leaves because he's frustrated. Obviously, he doesn't get his answer why you can't change the past. Because the interface says, well, one can't travel to the past. But I travel to the past, but,
Yeah, he's not satisfied.
Yeah, so he decides to travel a little bit farther ahead into the future. He goes to 2037, where he sees, when he's in 2030, he looks around. It's very much like Back to the Future 2 when he's in 2015.
Right,
There's
right.
monitors and cars, and he talks to people, and they're dressed different, and you kind of see
Predicted the yoga pants.
predicted the yoga pants,
Yeah,
sure.
lots of bikes.
Lots
Everyone's
of
on
bikes. Everyone's on bikes.
And then there's an ad for a moon base they're building.
Yes, that's what
Yeah.
I was going to say. So they're building a moon base, they're colonizing the moon, and when he travels to 2037, just 7 years later, he sees that the moon is exploding, kind of, and breaking apart, think like Death Star, kind of, and there's people that come up, and again, like Back to the Future 2, who come up and they're like, what are you doing? And and so he's like, no, have you been living under a rock? Why do you not know why the moon is exploding?
He says,
and he's
yes,
like,
I have.
Yes. Talk to me as if I have been living under a rock. What's going on? And they're like, dude, the moon's exploding because they tried to, demolish some of it for the colonization, and it exploded, and
The moon's breaking up is what they say.
Yeah, the
I like
moon's
that
breaking
quote.
up.
The moon's breaking up.
But my question is, would that event affect that much of the Earth in that way?
It'll mess with the tides, and some of it could fall onto the Earth and cause some damage. But the moon's really far away.
Yeah.
And we see in the future that the moon is still up in the sky, kind of fractured.
Mhm.
It's like almost becoming like a ring system. Eventually, I think it might. But I mean, it might. If it falls towards Earth, it'll cause some damage. Yeah.
Okay, but enough damage that 800,000 years
No.
later, it's still gonna be back to caveman times.
Well, it depends. Who
Um,
knows what kind of crazy stuff happened in between then?
Yeah, I mean, maybe like what killed the dinosaurs wasn't that big, and it wiped out I think 80 to 90% of the life on Earth. But
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know.
I guess to me,
Yeah.
it just felt a little bit
Movie logic, it
far-fetched.
makes sense. Yeah.
It is a little far-fetched. I mean, I just kind of decided to go with it because I'm like, well, something probably happened. Civilization fell apart. Cable TV was cut off. Something happened, and
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
just went crazy.
I mean, not everyone died, but people went underneath the ground and also stayed above ground to
Mhm.
become the Eloi. So I don't know quite what happened, but I bought it enough. But
Yeah, it kind of was like...
Kind of a
not
stretch.
really,
Even
yeah.
for a movie like this, you're like, stretch.
Yeah,
yeah.
for me. So he manages to evade these people who told him what happened to the moon, but he gets hit, I guess, by some debris of some sort, and it knocks him out. And when he's knocked out, he pushes a knob in the machine, and it takes him to 800,000 years into the future. I think it's
Yeah.
802,703 or something like that. And he sees that quote-unquote humans, who are, what are they, Eloi?
The Eloi, yeah.
Are colonized kind of on the side of a cliff of what used to be New York a very long time ago, and it's...
They're humans. They're just people that don't speak English, except for one person.
Right.
yeah,
Conveniently.
A couple people, yeah.
yeah, they say that they learn English when they're young because it's not the native language.
That's
it's something
the
like that.
stone language.
The stone language, yeah. This is, for me, where it felt like a completely different movie pretty much after this. I wanted to see more of him searching for this answer, trying to figure out why can't he change the past? But instead,
He gives up
decides
instantly.
to
Right.
just stay there 800,000 years, even after she's shown him that his time machine is perfectly fine and perfectly be able to use. So they go and she is Mara, this girl played by Samantha Mumba, who is one of the few people in their village, I guess, who can speak English. So she helps him. And she shows him his time machine, and it's perfectly fine. She's like, hey, you should leave and take my little brother, Kalen. And he's like, why? And she's like, because you don't know. This movie, after he meets these Eloi, they're so vague
Right.
about everything. They're like, oh, we don't talk about that. Oh, I don't know. Oh, it's, don't worry about it. It's, we don't ask questions. And so they don't tell him that there's these evil monster things that live underground and collect people,
Right.
Morlocks, who collect people and
Eat them.
eat them, and then they're never seen again. But
Or mate with them.
yeah.
Yeah.
But to me, it feels like maybe that's something that you should tell a new person who's like helping you in your village. But
Yeah, because 5
I
minutes
know.
after he sees a machine, they get attacked. Or
Yeah.
no, I think afterwards they go to some windmill thing and then they get attacked.
But pretty much,
Yeah.
yeah. They get attacked. Samantha Mumba is taken. And then it's like, suddenly it's like a horror action adventure movie. And,
Right.
and they're like chased, and it's this really long, overly drawn out fight scene of him trying to save her and save Kaylin, her little brother, or her son, I don't remember, but
Her brother.
her brother. And then he's determined. He talks to some of the other villagers, the other Eloi who managed to stay alive, and says, I'm going to find her. And they're like, you don't know how to find her. And Kaylin's like, hey, I think I can help. And he takes him to Orlando Jones, who, for some
Mythical reason.
800,000 years
mythical
in the
is
future.
even a generous word of it. 800,000 years into the future, from 2030 to 802,703 or whatever it is, Orlando Jones' holographic person is still perfectly functioning underground.
He's a little older, he's a little bit disgruntled, but he's still there.
But
Still
like
there.
he's a little bit like crazed, like as if he had been underground for like maybe 1,000 years, but like 800,000 years.
Right, he would be like... I guess he's a machine, so...
But what is he getting his energy from?
Yeah, that was my biggest question. Like, is he just, like, on some crazy battery that just keeps going?
Yeah.
Or, like...
In
is he-
2030,
Energizer.
Is he
sponsored
powered by, like, the sun or by, like, air?
But he's underground, so even
Yeah.
if he was powered by the sun,
Yeah, it makes...
in 2030, we have really good batteries, I guess.
there's
I
no
don't
way.
It's very strange.
And there's no way that he could still, like, speak that well as a like his,
Right.
that none of his functions were errored. Oh, sorry, the lending library is out of business. Yeah, because he touches the books and they
Right,
like, turn
they
to
disintegrate.
dust.
Yeah, they turn into, like, what looks like the inside of, like, plywood, drywall or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
You know?
I mean,
Uh-huh.
although I am glad he's there because it's Orlando Jones.
Right, of course.
We
but-
love Orlando Jones.
Yeah.
But the thing is, so he talks to Orlando Jones about what's going on and who
Right.
these Morlocks are. First of all, how does Orlando Jones
Ah.
get new information?
I do know.
Okay.
Because he had a friend that stayed with him for a while.
Oh yes, they do
Yeah.
talk about that.
And Eloi escaped the Morlock, I think, and was hanging out with Orlando Jones. And at some point, Orlando Jones gestures to a skeleton. He like pats its head, even though he's a hologram, and it's a skeleton kind of behind him.
Oh,
And he says
yeah,
he was
yeah.
here. It's been a while since he'd been here, but he was my dearest friend.
So there's enough energy for this hologram to retain new information, I guess.
I don't know.
Okay,
It's a
well,
powerful
the
hologram.
whole
Whoever made that battery
yeah,
did
no
a good
kidding.
job.
Wow, that's useful. So he tells him basically the information he needs to know about where to find them. So he
To the
and
east.
so he and Kaylin head that way, and he tells Kaylin to wait to light a fire so that they can find their way back, because he doesn't want to be slowed down by a little kid, pretty much.
And, little kids in movie plots get annoying.
For sure. Yeah. So that was always good. And so he goes down into their underground cave, and he's immediately captured and put into this big cell where Mara, Samantha Mumba, is like in another little cage in there. And he meets, what's his name? Uber Morlock, I think
Uber
his name
Morlock,
is.
Jeremy Irons.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And he controls the Morlocks telepathically.
Yep.
I think he says.
Yeah, he controls them, and he can also read minds, and he puts the dreams into the Eloy's heads to keep them afraid.
So that they don't come to
Yeah.
their place.
They're basically cattle for the Morlocks. That's, I mean, in the novel, the Eloi are even more docile, even more ineffectual, and they're just cattle for the Morlocks. And so in the movie, it's the same thing. They're basically just food for them. And he makes sure of that.
Yeah. So, and he definitely makes a point to tell Alexander that without him, they would run amok and eat everything and they wouldn't last. And so he's sustaining them, I would say. You know, like keeping them repopulated.
And that he's one of many. That there are other areas of the world that are controlled by other Uber Murlocs who just keep everything running in this particular cycle.
Yeah. So he and Alexander have a conversation, and Alexander again brings up his question about why he can't change the past. So I'm going to play that little bit.
You built your time machine because of Emma's death. If she had lived, it would never have existed. So how could you use your machine to go back to save her? You are the inescapable result of your tragedy.
So it's a quick clip, but he tells him what he couldn't figure out on his own is that because he built the time machine as a consequence of Emma dying, so because of that, he can't use that consequence to go back and change the past, because then the time machine wouldn't exist, and it would be a whole paradox and all this nonsense, and he tells him he's the result of his whatever. So that's, I mean, then it's the end of the movie, more or less. Alexander...
They fight.
They jump onto the time machine because somehow the Uber Morlock, Jeremy Irons, has, brought it under to his little cavern thing. And they fight and they travel and get 6 million years into the future at one point. And finally, Alexander pushes him off, and you see this cool scene of him disintegrating.
Right,
Jeremy Irons.
The Uber Murloc. Trying to hold on, but the rest of his body is disintegrating.
He's holding on to Alexander's
his hands
neck.
still,
And so when he finally disintegrates, it's just his hands and a little bit of his wrist and is all that's left. And it's really gross. Then he throws it off, and then Alexander sees where he landed 6 million years in the future and sees that it's this wasteland around him. And so he decides to go back and save Mara, and so he goes back to where he was before they were fighting, and he saves her, and then he explodes the time machine, and he and Mara manage to get out in time, and it explodes and wipes out all those Morlocks that were in that space.
Space.
Yeah. And that's the end of the movie. He decides to stay in 800.
Well, he has to now.
He has to now, obviously, but 80270, whatever, is where he ends up, and then that's
him and Orlando Jones teach the ways of the past. And,
sure.
Yeah.
And then there you go. So I guess you could also say that maybe they're going to try and, defeat the other Morlock.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. If that could be a quote-unquote sequel, but then what would you call it? Time Machine 2, No Time Machine? It would just be,
Yeah, because it's not really... There's no technology. There's not... Yeah. Even 1899, there is stuff for him to evolve with. There's nothing... It's really caveman. There's nothing to
right. The Morlocks
build.
have basic industry to do something, but that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
So they maybe just call it the time.
No time machine.
No time machine.
There you go.
Right. Starring Guy Pearce and Samantha Moomba.
So that's the plot of the movie. It's it starts out strong and falters into a movie you don't really... I didn't really care about the Eloi that much. I felt like they're just
people that do stuff every day.
Which was also something that bothered me, was after 800,000 years of evolution, these people haven't, human beings haven't changed at all in how they look.
Very little. They do try to do some little token things that they changed a little bit, like some of their body parts. Their noses are a little bit different and such. But other than that, like, there's really...
Well, that's one thing I didn't like about the movie versus the book, is in the book, the Eloi are like little, kind of fat little babies. Like, they're as equally warped as the Morlocks are. The Morlocks are these big old brutes, and the Eloi are like little, almost like little cherubs that just are there to be eaten. Mm-hmm. But in here, they're just human beings. They don't look any different. But the Morlocks look way different.
Right, and you think that would give you more sympathy to their plight. And, they definitely have, like, the scene where he discovers, like, how that they eat them, and he ends up, like, in literally a pool of dead human body parts.
Yeah, gross.
It's pretty horrific when you think about it, but at the same time, other than Mara, they give you really no reason to care about the Eloi, because they're just kind of like...
They don't really care about him.
Right, they don't really care about him, and it also, I think it's more frustrating to see really stupid and careless humans than it is to see, like, fat little babies that are, like, getting, like, pulled down into the ground.
Well, they're actually even more careless in the book. They don't even care about anything. He saves, in the book it's Weena that he saves, but she's drowning, and the other ones don't even care about it. They just let her drown, and he saves her because he's like, you guys have no humanity, because they're just like little frolicking things that don't care about anything.
Right.
So they're even more sympathetic in the movie.
And that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. So I was looking up some fun facts. These are all on IMDb, on their page. Did you know Guy Pearce was so consistent in most of his takes that the audio from one take could be put with the video from another, and the combination of the two would fit perfectly?
That's a good actor.
That's pretty amazing.
He needs to get more work.
Yeah. I mean, he's pretty good.
He's pretty good.
Other things. There's a picture of H.G. Wells that's visible in Alexander's house in several shots.
Oh, cool.
One thing I really did enjoy of this movie was the montage scenes of like time passing were really good. There's when he first time travels and he drops the watch with a picture of Emma, and it falls outside of his time bubble, and you can see it, disintegrate. At first, I couldn't tell if he was going forward or backwards in time, and then it dropped and it disintegrated and then disappeared. So obviously he was going forward, but it was cool to see those transitions.
Right.
Did you like those?
Yeah, the time lapses were really cool, especially when he was like disintegrated. That was a pretty cool effect of him, like becoming decaying and then just melt away.
Right, and that's something I was talking to you guys about before we started recording this episode. The question about Jeremy Irons' character, the Uber Morlock, when he's holding on to Guy Pearce and he's being disintegrated. The question is the Uber Morlock, is he experiencing it as quickly as Guy Pearce is, or is for him, is it weeks, months, maybe even years of him just slowly disintegrating before he finally dies?
I'm pretty sure he experiences it in real time. It looks like he's in Guy Pearce's time because he's kind of reacting the same like speed that he is, but I mean he ages older, so I'm sure in his mind he's been there for like not millions of years, but a lot of years until he decays.
It is millions of
Yeah,
years.
he's been hanging
to 6
there.
million something,
Right.
yeah.
So it's like, that must have been just bizarre.
Yeah.
What a horrible way to die.
Weird to think. That's a good comment. It's weird to think about.
It is weird to think about. Plus, I mean, I totally get why he had to kill the Uber Morlock to like advance his own goals, but it's kind of a jerk move when you really think about it. Because yes, the Morlocks are these terrible creatures that are eating people, but really when you think about it, to them it'd be like us eating cows. Like that's how they see it. Mm-hmm. So he's literally killing this guy who he makes very clear that if he were to die, it'd actually probably be worse off for the Eloi. That he just kills him off because he's like, I'm not going to even try to reason with you with like what I'm going to try to do. Jeremy Irons, he's a villain, kind of. I feel like he's more like an antagonist. He doesn't do anything particularly sinister to Guy Pearce. Like, he could totally just be like, I'm going to keep you here now, Guy Pearce, and make you my like slave. He's like, no, go back. You're not meant for this time.
Yeah, he gives him a choice at least.
Like, he's like...
He's not that bad.
He's not that bad. I mean, like, obviously he has some very barbaric practices, like stealing Eloi, pretty much raping Eloi women for the Murlocs. I mean, he's not a good dude. But as far as how monstrous he could have been, he's pretty
It's kind of like Wreck-It Ralph.
Right.
Like, he's a bad guy, but he's not a bad guy.
Right. But yeah, but
his punishment is like to literally decay slowly for thousands of years.
Yeah,
like.
but Guy Pearce, in order to kind of, I guess, solve the issue of them just going crazy, he makes his time machine into a time bomb, like literally. So he puts his watch into one of the gears, and it winds up all this, I guess you call it temporal energy, and then it explodes and it wipes out all the Morlocks in that cave, and it makes it go away. So I think they're safe now that
they're safe.
He's dead, but there's still Morlocks in the world. There's still tons of Uber Morlocks.
There's probably an Uber Morlock in Boston. He used to be Boston. They're still killing the Eli and everything. And even if you did overthrow them, what next? Rebuild? I mean,
it doesn't seem like they want to rebuild.
Right.
Otherwise, after 800,000 years, wouldn't they have tried to?
Right.
Well, I think in the movie, I think either Lando Jones or someone says they have no knowledge of the past and no care for the future, so they just live in the moment.
They just live.
They're just trying to survive. So, and this is more a science thing than rather a time travel thing, but it kind of applies. At one point, like you said, he goes like 6 million years in the future. I don't think Earth would be around for that much long. Because,
it will be, 6 million years is nothing in the
okay, because how much longer do we have on our sun? What is it, 20 million years?
No, 5 billion plus.
Oh, yeah, 5 billion on our sun?
5 billion years of the sun.
And then 5 billion years of the sun. And then what is it, 200 billion years Andromeda would crash into our Milky Way?
I think it's around the same time as the sun exploding.
Well, that's going to be...
something like that.
I don't think we need to worry.
I don't have to worry about that, but I'm just saying, like, if I'm in heaven and, like, I don't know how time would work in heaven, that's another day.
Well,
I would love to see what that looks like.
Honestly, I mean, we can see it now in the other galaxies in the sky. We can see that happening. And honestly, we'll be fine because the stars are so spaced out that the gravity will maybe sling some stars around, but the stars won't be colliding into each other. They'll kind of just be reformed into this big old galaxy that won't be... There'll still be stars, and ours probably will be gone by then, but, it wouldn't kill us all.
So, before we get too off topic,
I just thought that was very... I was just wondering, like, would the Earth be around?
Yeah, you bring us space. You bring us space. I'm right there.
So, how do they time travel in this movie? Obviously, they use a time machine. Whoa, mind blown. Yeah. So, Alexander builds this of his own mind.
Yeah.
But what does it run off of?
Math.
Sure.
No, we don't quite know.
Else.
I mean, he has some valves on his machine, so he has some thing going on, and there's these two rods that light up, and the two circular things at the end rotate to cover him in this bubble of, I guess, temporal energy, I'll call it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's supposed to manipulate the fourth dimension somehow.
Very like steampunk.
Yeah, it is very steampunk.
Yeah, I think it might be equivalent to the DeLorean almost, how it can maybe you take advantage of quantum mechanics to use the fourth dimension, but obviously it's impossible.
Yeah, it never really goes into what it does to time travel. It just works, no matter what time period it is.
What's more interesting are the rules. He can change the past. As we saw, he moved Emma around and she died a different way. And
but what is interesting is that the actual machine itself does not move. It stays in the same spot. It just shifts through time.
Yeah, and I have a question about that. Do people see it when he's just sitting there moving through time?
Well, yeah.
Because we can see it from the outside shots.
Well, when it's stopped, for sure.
Well, because even when he turned it on in the background, when he's fighting the Morlocks, you can see it moving or doing something. So if he's sitting there for 30 or 40 years, do people see him just sitting there?
But think of how fast it is. Those people, you wouldn't even, you could see it for a second and it wouldn't even be there that long.
Well, to the people on the outside, he'd just be sitting there moving super slow. Because to him, they're moving fast. So to him, he's moving so slow. He'd just be sitting there looking around very, very slowly over the course of years.
Right, now we're getting into relativity theory.
Well, I mean...
Why wouldn't it be fast for the people who are looking at it, though?
Because so if he's sitting there for 5 minutes, for him, outside of him, it's been 100 years. So if he moves, if it takes him 5 minutes to look left to right, people see him moving left to right over the course of 100 years, which is super, super slow.
Yeah.
But in the time lapse, we see that his house becomes a car factory, and they put boxes over that area. So did they just see some guy in a machine, and they, hey Bob, what about the guy in the machine? Put some boxes over it, he'll be fine. Like, do they see him there?
It's some sort of weird performance art.
Yeah,
That's a
but
good
also
question.
in 2037, the reason why he stops is he feels a shake in his machine, so he stops it. So he can be affected by the outside world.
Maybe it's. I mean, it does seem like there's a bubble, though, to a certain extent, because
Yeah, there's
when he
some
goes
protection.
through all these forces of nature that are happening, it happens around him. It doesn't affect inside of his bubble.
Yeah,
so
but
maybe when he's traveling,
Right.
they don't see it, but when he stops, then they can see it. I don't
Maybe,
know.
but I swear in one shot when he's passed out, he has like frost on him, like he lived that pretty quickly. Like he got some frost on him and then it went away.
I
Maybe,
don't know.
Maybe.
Part
That's
of
my
it was
question.
outside of it. I don't know.
maybe.
It's true, yeah. Maybe the spear doesn't offer complete protection, like,
Mhm.
but it
Sure.
offers some like minimum, like almost like driving in a car or something.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like as long as nothing happens, like nothing falls
But,
on.
like-
I don't know. Yeah.
But like, what if there's a tree that was planted in the middle of where his machine was?
Yeah. Well,
Oh.
they actually
What would happen?
they built around it because in 2030 now he's on concrete and he's in an alleyway and not in his house anymore. So they built around him.
Maybe
mean-
the time machine makes it so it affects time and space so that people will never build
Oh,
over
maybe
it.
it's like gives an illusion almost, like
Right.
an invisibility cloak. Like it's you don't really see that it's there, but you don't.
You can't
look at
touch.
it.
Yeah, you can't like
Yeah.
affect it or anything. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Which scientists in the 2030s would be really curious as to why that is. Let me tell you. Because
Well, not if they're trying to build the moon and then explode it.
I
so
mean, we'd be curious
we'll
about it
visit.
now. Yeah.
You would be curious.
Yeah,
about
they were too busy doing
Yeah.
exploding the moon, building incredible batteries that powered AIs, and inventing yoga pants.
Yeah.
But other than the machine itself not moving, but it can be physically moved because it moved into the
Yeah, they
Morlock's
move it
place.
around.
Yeah, but
Wonder how many men that took.
yeah, but
But on the rules, actually, I want to talk about the paradox because it's actually a really good paradox because
Mhm.
he can change the past.
yeah, he
So-
can go from he can go to the past or to the future.
Right. So if he's right, so if he were to go back and somehow save her, then it wouldn't happen. But because even when he did move her around and Emma still died, him in that present day would still make a time machine. But since he could change the past, if she didn't die, then he wouldn't make the time machine, and then time would change. So that way he would just kind of blink out of existence. The Guy Pearce we're watching because he then changed the past.
Right.
You know.
That's a good point.
But would that give him the future that he wanted then?
Well, I don't know.
If
That's
it had
the
worked?
question. That's what the Uber Morlock showed him. He showed him his life with Emma, with the kids,
Mm-hmm.
and he
And,
said you
when
can't
he
have
puts
it.
away the drawings of
Yeah.
Right.
And he
Of
said
the
he can't
mission.
have it because of the paradox.
yeah.
So
Right.
I
so
mean,
it's because. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So it's like because he can't change that particular moment in past only because he could never even go back into the past
Yes.
if it wasn't for that moment.
Exactly.
But if he wanted to go back and say change, I don't know, like if he wanted to change the outcome of like
Of the moon exploding.
the moon exploding, he could.
Yep.
He could change it.
but he doesn't care. He
Because
just cares about where he currently is.
As long as
Right.
it isn't
He's kind of like the Eloy.
as long as it isn't a result effect of the time machine itself, he
Yeah.
could change it. Is that the idea?
Yeah, whatever wouldn't stop him from creating the time machine. So Emma would still die, which to Guy Pearce, that's all he cares about. So
Well, until he meets Samantha.
until he
Moonbug.
meets
He's
Samantha.
Samantha Moonbug. You know, so I don't know. It is interesting because the movie poster for it, the official movie poster, has a tagline that says, "Where would you go?"
Where would
But he really doesn't go that
he
many
doesn't.
places.
He only goes to New York, just in different time periods.
Just in different time periods.
When would
And
you go?
When would you go? Yeah, when would you go? Would be a better,
That would have been cooler.
That would
too.
have better tagline.
you know,
They should pay us to make a time
Right.
travel movie.
Yeah.
right? I mean, it is a wasted opportunity because like it's kind of weird that he decides like I'm going to blow up this time machine. It's like, wouldn't you rather go back in time and prevent this ever even happening between like Eloy and like Murlocs and that?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't you try to fix
Yeah.
that? That like he gives up on stuff very quickly. Like the
He
love of
really
his
does.
life dies. The one who spent 4 years, and his first thing is like, "Oh, she died that time. Well, I guess I can't fix the past." Which he can't, but it's like he doesn't try anything else at all. Like he's
like
just
a
like,
different day, or like tell her, like cancel his plans with her or something
Right.
and see what happens. Like
bring
that's
the flowers.
which is something that I think in other movies, it's kind of ringing some bells of other movies that we're going to see later on. Even something like Harry Potter 3, which I'm really excited for us to get to that movie because it'll be really cool to compare those actions and consequences versus what you can and can't do against other movies, especially something like this. But, for now, yes, it is kind of, it's a paradox. So there you go.
Yeah.
So obviously we did talk about consequences. Scientific accuracy, is it accurate?
No.
No,
I
because
mean-
there's nothing to...
Yeah, it's not going to happen, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, some things like the time, like the future is kind of cool, I guess, like the moon exploding and that kind of stuff. But, impossible.
Yeah, I agree. I would have rather seen him actually cared about something other than himself.
Right.
Yeah.
I think would have made for a better movie. I mean, I get it as a character choice, but why wouldn't you travel back to when what, I don't know, not what caused the Eloi and the Morlocks to evolve, because we know it was the moon essentially, but can't he find a way to stop that, and what would that affect, and
how would that change the world?
Yeah.
How about he tries powering his time machine off whatever's powering Orlando Jones' hologram?
Yes, it would be very powerful.
Side note on the Orlando Jones hologram thing, I already talked a little bit about how I think it's actually probably one of the more accurate things what the future's going to be like with advanced AI. But it's interesting that it is still playing. There's the game I've been talking to Matt about quite a bit, like the game like Mass Effect. They have minor spoiler alert. There's an AI interface that has been put as a warning message, or virtual interface has been put as a warning message about, I think they say it's 50,000 years in the past, or half a million years in the past, something like that. And it is literally just put away and left on one last charge for when the right person comes, it can come back on, and then as soon as it's done delivering its message, it's gone. And I thought that's a much more interesting thing, and that could have been maybe a better idea if they wanted to keep the Orlando Jones AI in there just to kind of fill them in on what was happening. Maybe it's it had just enough juice that if someone came along and knew how to turn it back on, it could come on and say, "Hey, world's a mess."
Sorry.
Yeah, right. That's true. I also think it's interesting that that Orlando Jones has its own personality.
Yes.
You definitely see that when Alexander's in 2030 and Orlando Jones rolls his eyes. He tells him science fiction when he talks about time travel. So he definitely has his own. It's not just.
He has comedic timing.
It's not.
He has comedic timing.
Yeah, it's more Siri than Google Maps. It's for a really strange reference, but
he's a very powerful shackled AI.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously the time travel is relevant to the story.
First.
At least in the very beginning it is. And then it kind of is very much brushed aside once they get him where they want him to be for the second half of the movie. Which of course, as we've said, is the downfall of this film. But anything you guys wanted to know about the clothes or the sets? What did you think about 800,000 years in the future?
You got some suits, you got bowler hats.
Yeah.
Bowler
in
hats
2030, you got...
in 1899 bowler hats, which was, but I don't know. By the end of the movie, I was so annoyed with it that Philby's little bit of him throwing his bowler hat.
Yeah, he's a better man now. He's
not
individual.
following the crowd.
Yeah.
That was a weird moment. Yeah.
I'm kind of over this.
Bowler hats are expensive, man. Even today, you don't just throw them away like that. And I do like the movie accurately predicted yoga pants.
Yes.
That's a good job, Simon Wells. You got one right.
Yeah. I mean, 2030 looked pretty believable. I think.
I agree.
There wasn't flying cars. I think there were some helicopters or stuff in the background, but I don't think there was any flying cars.
Right.
It looked believable.
Yeah, it did. I definitely agree. Big, giant monitor screens on buildings and stuff. That's pretty much believable.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like 800,000 years when the only bits of history that they had were some names of buildings Brooklyn Bridge sign and Tiffany and Co. And they were this is the history that we know, and it's that's the history that in 800,000 years people are going to know about the Brooklyn Bridge and Tiffany and Company.
Hey, Tiffany and Co. paid for that machine to look that good.
Yeah,
in the production budget.
I'm sure they did.
I'm sure they did. Yeah.
Diamonds
Okay.
are forever.
Yeah.
So I know you wanted to talk about Einstein.
I've
They made an Einstein. Let me set it up for you.
Yeah.
They made an Einstein reference in the beginning of the movie when Alexander is talking to Philby in 1899.
1899.
So Philby mentions to Alexander that he got another letter of his correspondent who's
He called him a crazy German bookkeeper, I think.
Yeah.
And the guy mentioned, Alexander mentions Einstein by name. But in 1899, Einstein was not doing anything. He was just 19 and 20.
the idea is that Einstein and Alexander had been corresponding,
sorry,
and
that's
Alexander was helping him
in his
studies.
Right.
more or
Right.
less.
But he mentions he's a bookkeeper. But first of all, Einstein didn't even start working at the patent office or anything like that until after 1900. And he was only 19 to 20, so he was just an average student then. He wasn't doing any crazy, time stuff. He was just graduating from school,
That seems
trying to
like-
get a job.
For
It seems like
sake
that seems like such an easy thing to fix. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I got a letter from like a young student. Like that
Yeah.
seems like such an easy research
Yeah.
thing to fix.
Yeah,
for
that
the
would've been
story
cool.
and sake of using Einstein.
Yeah, if they just said, "Oh, here's another letter from this young kid Einstein," that would have been funny. That would have been cool. It'd be like, "Oh, Einstein and him are kind of like he's aspiring to be Alexander." That'd be cool. But
Right.
instead,
Uh-huh.
it's just totally wrong.
And apparently Alexander also invented the electric toothbrush.
Yeah.
And there's a line that said you'll keep your teeth well into their 40s or something. People will keep their teeth well, which I guess.
Which is nice, but also there were civilizations keeping their teeth far longer than that up to that point. There were societies that were keeping their teeth for quite a long time.
Oh, they weren't in England, so
They weren't in England, that's true.
Yeah.
Not in England, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had another. Oh, sorry. Are we?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, the time explosion that he did, it's physically impossible. I don't understand how a wave of time can make things age quicker. It looks cool, but you can't have a time energy come through and wipe and you can't run away from a time energy wave and have it age people and you just jump out of the way. Like that is entirely 100% sci-fi.
Yeah, that's true.
Fiction and science.
There was another comment I called him in my notes the weirdo robber who kills Emma the first time. He asked Alexander, "Why did you stop me?" He's like, "Why did you stop me? Why did you do that?" After Emma is killed.
Right.
I'm like,
He
if that's
blamed
what you're
him.
gonna ask, then don't try and rob people and shoot them in
Right.
the first place.
Right. It's like-
What? It
Yeah.
blew my mind that like imagine you go up to someone and you rob him at gunpoint, and the guy tries to take the gun from you and accidentally shoots your wife, and then he says to you, "Why did you do that?"
right.
Why
You're
did
like,
you make me clear?
Why did you bring a gun? Why did you rob us?
Why
Why did you
die?
threaten
Yeah,
to
like-
kill us anyway? Why do you care?
Mental health just wasn't the same back then.
So, yeah. So, would you guys want to experience this time travel? This one, I think, is actually a little bit more interesting
Yeah.
with this question because in the past, something like Back to the Future, you go very specifically through Marty's parents. Something like Time Crimes, you go through just a few days,
Right.
experiencing kind of horrific events, more or less, all this kind of stuff. But with this movie, you really are traveling through different periods of time. So, who wants to start? Matt, you want to start? Would you want to
Sure.
experience this time travel?
Yeah, reading the book as a kid, I definitely wanted to, and even now, especially if the machine looks that good as it did in the movie, I think I would want to. I would prefer to move a little bit, have some lateral, movements in space.
Yeah.
But if you're just moving through time, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. I would.
Yeah, I think this would be a cool one to experience the time travel with. Just a couple of questions I have about its safety, but
Yeah.
in a general sense, it seems like it's a pretty convenient way to travel through time.
Mhm.
And it also says you can change stuff in the past and the future.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to go back and just kind of play with it. I don't think I would want to go. I would want to go 800 years in the future. I don't know what I could possibly gain out of that.
800,000.
800,000,
Yeah.
years in the future. I don't know. I still don't even know if the Earth. I mean, not because of Andromeda or anything. I'm just worried that someone's going to blow up the Earth before I get there. So I'm worried that I would get.
Then where would you land?
Yeah, where would I land? I'm like, I don't know about that. Maybe like a couple days into the
Yeah.
past.
Well,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, they were in New York, not England, but he is
Yeah.
British. But
Right.
if they're in New York, it might be underwater 800,000 years from now.
Right,
So who
exactly.
knows?
It might be 100 years, 80
Mhm.
years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would want to experience time travel. I agree. I wouldn't necessarily want to take the risk of going 800,000 years in the future. unless I could like guarantee that if there was nothing to land on, that I could like float
Right.
wherever I was.
Right.
But I think it's a cool machine. I really thought visually it was really stunning, and I think it would be kind of fun to do that as long as, keep all arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times.
Right.
Yeah.
So, other things you noticed about the film, maybe non-time travel related?
Yeah, I saw in the credits that Doug Jones was listed as a spy Morlock, and Doug Jones is a legendary prosthetics actor. He was in Hellboy. He's the fish guy. He was in Pan's Labyrinth. He was Silver Surfer in Fantastic Four.
Okay.
So he was just some random spy Morlock that was in a shot somewhere that didn't have a part. So I was like, oh, cool, Doug Jones.
Oh.
So
One of you maybe had a bigger part at one point and it was cut down.
I don't know. I mean,
He wasn't like a star.
He's just a regular Morlock, so they don't really do anything. They just attack and look at stuff. So
Interesting.
I did want to compare, briefly, this movie compared to the time travel in Project Almanac, because in Project Almanac, when they go back to the past and rewrite their history, we had a lot of questions, a lot of plot holes about duplication, and about them being there, not being there. There should be more of them there. There's 2 sets of them at most in that movie. In this movie, there isn't duplication of him being there, as far as I could understand.
there is. Well, I think there is. He was there earlier than he would have been, and he tells Emma, I'll come by your place later on tonight. I'll be upset that you weren't there, but don't worry, it'll be okay.
Oh, okay.
So he acknowledges that he's
that's
still
right.
there in the past.
Okay.
And because once he's safe, he'll just leave and go back to the present and hope that everything's fine again. But I think he understood to Emma, when he talked to Emma that he was still there in his normal
Got it.
self, going to meet her at the park. But of course,
Okay.
he'd be disappointed, and he says, "Look, just don't worry about it. I'll be fine."
Okay, I missed
Got
that
it.
line. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Good to know.
Yeah, because I thought that too. Like,
Yeah.
is there 2 of them there? So
There was also a time travel or a Star Trek reference when he's in 2030. Orlando Jones does the Star Trek Spock thing.
Yeah,
It says,
live
live long and
prosper."
prosper. Yeah, we talked about it being meta in
Very
that
meta.
scene.
I
I did have a question about
Go
that
ahead.
while we're on it. Sorry. When he's talking to Vox, Orlando Jones, there's info about his time machine that he has. Where did that come from? Because he says some sort of offhanded line about when he's talking to him about Alexander that he built the time machine, blah blah blah. Is that because his works were in his house?
I think so. I think it led him. I think Orlando Jones implied that he was a crazy scientist who had these ideas of a time machine. He pulled up like a comic book cover, so maybe people extrapolated on that to make sci-fi off of it.
Right.
But I don't think. Yeah, I think that's kind of the extent of his knowledge of Alexander.
Right. He was like one of those someone who's like doomed to have like a cracked article written about him. Like, hey, did you ever hear about this guy? He
Right.
tried to make a time machine kind of thing.
Right.
Oh, loser. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what about you?
I had a problem with the Uber Morlock, how he just evolved to have telepathic and telekinetic powers. I get that he can read minds, so maybe he read about time travel, but he just knows everything. Like
Yeah.
he says that the Uber Morlocks, they went to enhancing their mind. I don't see how that can lead to telekinetic powers and. But because the fight they have in the time machine, it's an even fight.
It's
But
telepathic, not telekinetic.
no, he also pulls him towards him with his mind.
He does.
Yeah,
does?
he pulls
Yeah,
Alexander
that's
towards
cool.
him with his mind and like grabs him by the throat. If he could do that, it's no contest.
Yeah.
Alexander would have died. Like,
Yeah.
Plus, if he's able to read his thoughts, wouldn't he also be able to tell what punch he was going to do, or
Yeah.
tell that he was about to betray
Like
him?
in Men in Black 3.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, which we'll get to in a few weeks. But
yeah, yeah. So that was it. I had a problem with the Uber Morlock, but yeah,
Okay. What about you? Any other side notes that we didn't talk about?
No, I don't think there's anything else to talk about with it.
Would those stones, I said like Brooklyn Bridge, Tiffany and Co., New York, whatever, would those still be in that good of shape after 800,000 years?
I doubt it. I mean,
well, the library still is. Like, if someone moved them to be in a safe place, maybe. But
Well,
if
it was
everything else,
outside.
but yeah, the
It
Brooklyn
was-
Bridge thing
Yeah.
got exposed.
yeah, that's
And the
thing.
books were underground and they disintegrated.
Exactly. So that's
So to me that says no.
yeah. First of all, they can't teach in language off of those signs.
Right.
So maybe if it's oral tradition,
Yeah.
but still, even then,
That's a lot to remember. Brooklyn, Tiffany and Co. And that's pretty much about it. There are
Yeah.
a couple other signs there,
Those are words that you wouldn't use.
New York's best pizza.
Yeah.
In the language.
There's no
Like,
articles.
It's not useful English words.
No, it's very interesting. I don't really know. I mean,
You know, it would be funny if they were called the Tiffany instead of the Eloy.
the Tiffany, yeah, that's all they knew. Like,
Or something, the Brooklyns.
Yeah, the Brooklyns. That would be
Yeah.
interesting.
I'm Tiffany, and this is my company.
Yeah, this is like that would be true. Like that would actually make more sense. Even though it'd
Yeah.
be funny, it actually would make much
It
more
would,
sense.
it would be a cute bit.
And I'm pretty sure those stones would not have survived that long because I mean, you look at the ancient Greece statues and stone,
Yeah.
and that's just a couple thousand years old.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I severely doubt they would have lasted.
Yeah, especially
long.
after New York has
Yeah.
been weathered so much to have a huge cavernous canyon with a river underneath it. Like, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about the Rotten Tomatoes rating. The critics, before I read the percent, this is the consensus. This machine has all the razzle-dazzles of modern special effects, but the movie takes a turn for the worst when it switches from a story about lost love to a confusing action thriller.
Pretty
Which is
accurate.
pretty, yeah, that's pretty much what we were saying about it. Yeah, and it's at 29%, which is pretty low. I mean, you had said you were surprised that it was this low. Do you still feel that way after we kind of dug into it a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not thinking it should be that much higher. I don't think it should be fresh, but I thought it'd be at least in the 40% range because it is not a good movie. Like you said, the first half of it is fairly decent.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, and it's well made. Like it doesn't feel like, even though it feels like a very long made for TV movie, it doesn't feel like they skimped on anything, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't, like the sets don't look cheap or anything like that. It just feels like it's not quite right.
Yeah.
Like, but it does feel like a lot of effort went into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think the budget was about 80 million, and yeah, box office looks like they made about 56.
Yeah, I think their worldwide total was like 130.
100 something.
So it's like it made like a marginal profit.
Were you surprised that the rating was so low?
No. I mean, if you read the book and you saw the movie, you would be, yep, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do final reviews. Hi, do you want to start?
Sure.
Movie rating first?
I think movie rating, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10.
Okay.
A very, like I wasn't, like, I didn't hate this movie watching. I was like, oh, this movie's so stupid. It just doesn't work. Like, just nothing quite comes together how it should. But, you know, Guy Pearce is good in it. Even though I think Jeremy Irons' character is ridiculous, as Matt was alluding to, I do think Jeremy Irons does a good performance in it.
Yeah.
Like, even though he's basically been given this Deus Ex Machina, I'm going to explain everything character, he does a very good job explaining it. And he looks really good in that makeup.
Yeah, it's crazy eyes.
So, you know, it has its moments. There's certainly some really good scenes. Definitely the worst moments outweigh the good moments, but it has some merits. So 4 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think 4 out of 10 is a pretty good rating. For me, the biggest plus, harking back to my 15-year-old self, was Samantha Mumba.
Yeah.
You know, not that she was a great actress in it, but it was just, you know, I had a crush on her, so why not? But yeah, the movie was a little disappointing, especially after loving the book so much. I like that they gave Alexander something to care about in the time traveler, something to care about. In the book, he just traveled through time and just told a story at a dinner party. So the fact that he was trying to figure out why he couldn't change the past, or, you know, it gave him more of a purpose, which I thought was good. But yeah, it was pretty disappointing overall. So 4 out of 10.
Yeah, I actually agree with you guys. I would give it a 4 out of 10 as well for the movie. Obviously, it started strong and then faltered. I do agree with you, Hyde, that the negative parts definitely outweighed the better parts.
Right.
And I wish that it was more of how the beginning of the movie was, and, you know, I would have much rather seen that. But overall, yeah, I don't think I'd want to see it again anytime soon.
Right.
But I could see how maybe some people liked it as maybe a guilty pleasure movie or something like that.
Our listeners mentioned that they like seeing the time lapse scenes because it's very mesmerizing under the right circumstances.
Which were definitely some of the. Regardless of that, it was definitely some of the strongest parts of the movie were the time lapse. Yeah. Okay, so time travel rating.
I'm going to give the time travel rating like a 5.5 out of 10. Just a little bit over the median range because even though it's not possible, they also don't do so much that it gets confusing. Like, there's not a ton of plot holes in their time travel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they don't do enough for you to be like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, obviously, it's like, well, how does that thing stay there just still for all this time? Things just miraculously get built around it. But in a general sense, like, it's pretty cool. The time machine is awesome. Like, it really is.
Mm-hmm.
And
it also looks like the original in the novel, at least the artwork on the cover. It harkens back to it with like the lever and kind of the display. So it did a pretty good job of staying true to the
source material.
Yeah.
I really thought, like, it's an interesting... in fact, I think the time travel actually would have been higher rating if maybe... Obviously, the story doesn't allow for this, but maybe they had done some more traveling. Because he just travels in the past once, then travels to a couple different increments in the future, and then that's it. And it's kind of like, I wish I had more. This time travel is actually really cool. I wish I had more of it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I'm actually going to give it a little bit higher because probably I love the novel so much. The time travel is pretty close to what the novel did. Like, you can travel around and whatever. And it looked pretty cool. So I'll probably give it a 7 or 8 out of 10. 7.5, I think I'll land on.
Okay.
The machine looks cool. I like the paradox. I think it did a pretty good job. It wasn't like, what? That doesn't make sense. If you think about it, it actually does make sense.
Right.
And so of course there's some problems, but yeah, I think it's a pretty good example of time travel compared to other stuff. So 7.5.
Yeah, I would give it a 6 out of 10. I definitely think it's one of the. It sounds low, but it's definitely one of the stronger examples that we'll see for a little while. It's not a genetic trait. It's not just a car. I mean, Back to the Future is its own thing, but it's not some big vat of milk. So
right.
I appreciated that about it. And it's not some Prius battery, but overall I did enjoy this time travel, and I think that I liked that it wasn't just going into the future or just going into the past. It was a little bit of both, which I appreciate with time travel because whether it's feasible or not, I like the idea of doing both. Right. So there you go.
If you rated it on how possible it is, everything would be a 1 out of 10 because it's for the most part it's impossible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Except for what's a rare exception, but yes.
So, social media. Our podcast is on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. So please rate, subscribe, and follow us on all of those. And please comment to us. We do have Twitter and Instagram. We are at Time Travel Trio on Twitter and Instagram. We also have a Facebook, the Time Travel Trio Podcast, and personal social media.
You can find me, Hyde, at Robinson is Hyde on both Instagram and Twitter.
And I am Foreman in Space on both of those.
And I am Jen Marlis on both of those. And Matt is going to be leading next week's discussion, which is...
Back to the Future Part 2.
It's time for us to get back into Back to the Future.
Yes, I'm excited for that one. I think out of all the Back to the Futures, it's one of the most talked about, especially recently, with it being 2015, or it was 2015 recently. But if you haven't seen it, the plot synopsis is... After visiting 2015, Marty McFly must repeat his visit to 1955 to prevent disastrous changes to 1985 without interfering with his first trip.
So this will be what we were talking about. Would have been nice to be able to talk about this one while we're doing this, but we can talk about this one next time.
Yes.
About duplication in time. So that'll be interesting because this one, I mean, most people have probably seen this movie, but yeah, it is a big part of the plot is that there's more than one Marty at this time.
And also, I like about this movie is that they expand on the time travel knowledge, and we'll get into it in the episode, but it's not just Back to the Future Part 1 different, it's like way different than Back to the Future, the first movie. It's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. So that'll be fun. I think we've all seen this movie more than once. And anything else to add? Thank you to all of our listeners. We are slowly growing our fan base and people who are listening, people who are, following our social media, all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So we do appreciate all of that.
If you comment, we will read it.
We do,
We
yeah.
guarantee.
We do read it and try and comment when we can. But thank you, and
With that, we are out of time.